All right, let's kick off. So, live from the SDG tent at Davos, the INSEAD Hoffmann Institute is really proud to bring you a very challenging panel on the future of leadership. I'm Peter Zemsky, Professor of Strategy and Deputy Dean at INSEAD, and I'll be helping to get some of the insights out of a really accomplished but also very diverse panel. We have Sue Desmond-Hellmann, CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Rain Yulong, the head of HR, CHRO at JD.com. Maheen Rahman, CEO of the Alfalah Investment Management Group in Pakistan. We have Stephane Kasriel, the CEO of Upwork. I should mention that Sue is going to need to slip out at 6 o'clock, but slipping in at some point in the next 5 or 10 minutes will be Feike Sijbesma, the CEO of DSM. So we have we will keep a full panel the entire time. So in terms of the topic, if you think about what have we been hearing at Davos, I think there have been really two powerful currents, almost riptides in every conversation. One is this call for combining business with purpose, talking suddenly about mission and values. I even had one top CEO this morning talk about his feeling that he was responsible for the soul of his company. So this is a very dramatic change. And at the same time, this unrelenting continuation of the digital transformation of business and society. Just when you think you're figuring it out and catching your breath, this giant wave around data analytics and machine learning hitting you. And so right in the middle of all that is leaders. And what we want to really try and explore here is three things. What are each of you seeing in terms of how are the expectations shifting on your leaders? Any thoughts on how is effective practice emerging in terms of dealing with these expectations? And then finally, for us as a business school, how can we go about selecting and forming more leaders who can meet the challenges of our age? So that's our agenda. So I guess we'll kick off with Sue. Really pleased to have you here. Again, not only the CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, seeing all sorts of things, but for me, before that, you know, leading as a chancellor in the education sector, effective leader in biotech, you've really had a great career as a leader. How is that shifting? What are the expectations like today?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be on a panel where we actually let one man be on this panel, so I want you guys to all notice that. Good job. So things are changing. Here's what hasn't changed, and I've been grateful to be a leader in 3 different sectors, as you just heard. One of the things that hasn't changed is the fight for talent. No matter if I was in biotechnology at the University of California or now at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, what I ask myself every day is what makes people want to come here to work and stay here and stay engaged. And what has evolved is what that answer looks like. And so if some of the panels that I've heard, there's this almost a sense of leaders saying, oh, it's so hard to lead now. Here are the expectations of leaders. I think it's exhilarating to lead now. And it's exhilarating because we're being pushed in ways that I think are different, but I would say, use the word better. It is a healthy, positive thing for the most talented people who come and join Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to push me to say, does the experience I have working here every day match with your slogan on the wall, all lives have equal value? What does that really mean? Do the actions that we take as a foundation match up to our aspirations? If I say I believe in something as a leader, so here he is, welcome.
Bravo, big entrance.
If I say everyone deserves a great manager, but there are people who I manage who aren't great managers, what does that say about me? So I would say the clear difference for me is that the newest of our employees, no matter what age they are, have high expectations on how they can make a difference day one. They're more global thinkers. They've been exposed to global input through social media and being connected earlier in their career than I was. They want to see and live the purpose all the time. And so I would just say 2 ways that that's changed me as a leader. I hope positively. It's my aspiration to keep growing as a leader. So the first one is I spend more time listening and less time talking, and listening at all levels. People used to use terms like skip-level interviews. I'm doing more wandering. I'm having more office hours for anyone. And so I think that means I'm less hierarchical and want to listen more broadly. But the second thing might surprise people given the theme and the question. I've termed 2019 as a return to substance. So what does that mean? I actually kind of like that in many ways, not just managing. A return to substance is, does the person who you manage know what they're signed up for? Does that individual know when they come to work every day what the expectations are, what good looks like? If they have career aspirations, what are the capabilities they're lacking? What are their blind spots? Are they getting honest, open feedback? Gosh, I think I learned that when I first became a manager. That's a return to substance for me. So I would say that the pearl for me as a leader is it's exhilarating to get this kind of, to be pushed as a leader, and it's humbling to be reminded that all of us need to know what's expected of us, what's going to drive impact in our organization, and how we can learn and grow.
Thank you, Sue. Great kickoff. Rain, sitting over in, in one of the most dynamic e-commerce markets, a leader in that market, responsible for forming talent at JD.com. What are you seeing in terms of expectations? Similar or different to what you heard from Sue?
Okay. Maybe from my perspective and more from HR perspective, I will share, our expectation on the future leadership. Because, in era of the VUCA, we call it like a vitality, complexity, and also uncertainty, and also the changing environment. How, the HR can find the best talent, adapting, to face the new challenge in the environment. So just from my perspective, I would like to share maybe the new 3 ability, for the future leaders, they may need. First is link insight. And formal leader, more like we emphasize their professional sector. But going forward, when there was a problem, there was issues, we may lead the leader, they will break the wall between, the functions and also the boundary, and they will find like integrated, solutions. And so they not, independently think based upon their professional, but will have the link, insight to find the solution. And this is the first link insight. And the second will be servant leadership. Before, when you are a leader, most of the time, and people will talk about how you will successfully manage your team. And also, there was a hierarchy here. But going forward, for the young or new generation of the talent, they will expect, they will make a challenge on the power, challenge, for the hierarchy. And so we need the leader to be more, servant leadership and serve the team. And they will open up, more resource, like, coaching and monitoring and, to grow the people and let them, thrive in the environment. So this is the second, I would say, servant leadership. And the third, will be digital management insight. That means how you will use a new technology like AI, big data, and create the platform and to make the decisive process, to be more efficiency. And also, you will build, like the platform and let your team and know what the customer is thinking and to make the reaction and make the business or the segment to be successful. So this is my, original thought and from HR perspective. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I like the combination in both of your comments around how this key talent is like a key motor for this change. Just as in the digital world, we worry about customers. As leaders, who are your customers? And you have to follow them. Maheen, really great to have you here as a leader. In Pakistan, in the financial services industry. If you look at, you've achieved sort of amazing things in your sector as a woman, which can be challenging in some of those contexts. But just in general, what are you seeing where you sit in terms of shifting expectations?
Right. So thank you very much for having me here. I've always thought that if you can do business in Pakistan, you can do business pretty much anywhere. And just because it's a small group, as a show of hands, how many of you have actually been to Pakistan? Okay, so about 7 or 8, which is not bad. I had 1 last time I did this. So in order to understand what it means to really lead in Pakistan, you have to understand where Pakistan is today. It's a country of 200 million people. About 75% of those are below the age of 35. About 40% of those are below the age of 10. So what you have is an incredibly young population, and every year we add 3 million people into the labor force. And that means that over the course of 3 years, we've added the size of Paris directly into our mainstream labor force. So when you have this kind of demographic, then the challenges that are there and the opportunities that are there are completely different to what you might see in the developed world. So for example, there are 3 things happening in Pakistan today which make it a very unique, I would say, point in Pakistan's history. One is over the last 10 years, corporations have changed dramatically. They have gone from single unit industrial complexes to suddenly wide and diversified businesses with a huge focus on the domestic retail space. The second thing that's happened, which has been in the news quite frequently, is how Pakistan is part of China's One Belt, One Road program under CPEC. And there's been a lot of negative press and a lot of back and forth into what exactly this means for Pakistan and whether it is a good thing from the debt perspective. But here's what CPEC does. It does something incredibly basic. It adds things which Pakistan needs today, and that is energy, and that is infrastructure. And that would be the first step, I would say, towards the development of the economy as we are seeing it. And the third thing, which is really interesting, which is something that I would say is only about 5 or 6 years old, is there is a bubbling sort of undercurrent of tech entrepreneurship that has come up in Pakistan, which has really kind of attracted a lot of venture capitalists towards the market. So when you look at these 3 confluences, where you have sort of a rapid industrialization, a rapid urbanization, a very young labor force, as leaders, then, what we look at for corporations is not just your generic, your earnings growth and your price multiples and how the stock market moves. Those things are sure. Those are important from our perspective as investors. But I think what we are looking for as leaders is particularly one in terms of how do we get the talent in to capitalize in terms of the opportunities that we actually have, whether we import that capital or we develop that capital locally, I think will be the really interesting point to see. I think in terms of our own company, what we have really focused on is sort of the low-hanging fruit. And I think one of the main changes that we're going to see in Pakistan's labor force, and that's simply due to economic need, is the addition of women in a much larger way. Now, this is actually something that's fairly easy to do because you do have a large supply of them. University, university graduates are about equal in terms of men and women. I think that the issue that we face is sort of in the middle. We tend to lose women to the important aspect of child rearing, which I think is very necessary and healthy for societies. But I think what we are trying to do on our side is find ways to bring those women back in. So whether it is through programs that we retrain after a gap of, say, 5-6 years, we have done that. And I'm pleased to report that, I think when I joined the company about 5 years ago, we only had about, I think, 2 women. And today almost, I would say 10% of our workforce now is women. So clearly that is working and contributing. So I think our challenges and our opportunities are incredibly unique because it's sort of like sitting at the cusp where you've gotten over all the other issues that Pakistan was facing, and now you're really moving towards sort of a rapid expansion in economic activity. And that's really what I think is exceptionally exciting as a leader to be able to harness.
That's great. Okay, Stephen, a very different context. So sitting in the tech world in Silicon Valley with all of those spotlights and pressure building up, but also recently you IPO'd Upworks, and so now a public company. What are you seeing in terms of expectation changes on you as a leader?
Sure. So, I think in the 15 years since I've graduated from this wonderful school, thank you, I think what was taught at the time is still true today. I think what's different is the bar is much higher. And I would say, maybe to echo some of the things that were said earlier, particularly I would say in 3 dimensions. One is agility, the second one is purpose, and the third one is inclusion. And agility, like that's what everybody talks about here, right? Globalization, AI, the pace of change, the level of competition, the pressure on companies and leaders, including public company CEOs, thank you, is just, increasing exponentially every year. And that means we need to do things smarter because we can't necessarily hire more people or work harder every time. And so there's really a huge focus on how do we reorganize, how do we prioritize better, how do we rethink how we operate in order to deliver more with the same amount of time. Purpose, I think, there's one person who's very present in the World Economic Forum, and it's Mark Benioff. If you think about Salesforce.com as a business, it's as dull as it gets, right? They build software to help salespeople sell you more stuff. It's not exactly the most inspiring business on earth, but he's changed it into an incredibly purpose-driven company. They do a huge amount of philanthropic activity. They do a huge amount of things that are really thinking beyond just maximizing short-term shareholder value, and a lot more about what is the role of business in building a better future. Recently, so they're based in San Francisco. They're the biggest employer in San Francisco. Recently, he lobbied to create a new tax that was mostly impacting his company in order to improve homelessness in San Francisco. I mean, that is not maximizing short-term stakeholder value. Why is he doing this? Well, because he sees that this is ultimately what the future needs to look like. And I would say one of the big changes there is we have a new generation in the workforce. And the millennials, it's a war for talent, at least for the top talent, and definitely very much so in Silicon Valley. And you can't necessarily out-salary Google and Facebook all the time, but you can out-purpose them. And I would say particularly these days, it's getting easier. We're hiring, by the way. But I think the point is we have a generation of people that care a lot more about the SDGs, care a lot more about the meaning of the company. And despite the fact that they still sell SaaS CRM software, and it's probably still as dull as it's ever been, people feel like they belong in a company like this because it's doing something that is greater than itself. Right? And I think the third one is inclusion, and that's something that's really dear to my heart because that's what we do for our business, right? I mean, we help people that have physical and mental disabilities. We help people that have care duties that just can't take a traditional full-time job. We help people that live in a part of the country or part of the world where there are just no jobs. And I think they typically don't appear in government statistics. They typically don't make it to the top of the radar of talent acquisition. We see time and time again, companies say, we want to diversify our employee base and we want to be more inclusive, but they still write their job description saying, we need a college degree and we need people to come on site. Well, guess what? You've removed 90% of the world's population by doing that. And then you complain that there's a skills gap, right? And so I think there's going to be an opportunity for leaders to really rethink their talent strategy. And this is going to sound terrible for Inside, I'm sorry, but not just hire from the best MBA schools in the world, but actually try to look at people that have the underlying skills. At the end of the day, you're not buying an MBA. You're buying some underlying capabilities, attitudes, values, and the MBA is just a proxy for it. And there are people that have all of the attitudes and the values that you need and don't have that MBA. And if you actually hire for those types of characteristics, you'll get a much more inclusive and much more diverse talent pool.
Thank you, Stephane. Feike, last word on this. So again, you've someone who's been really out ahead on this whole issue of business and responsibility. Again, what are you seeing in terms of shifting expectations? Are you satisfied with where things are going? And some thoughts about how leaders can manage in this environment.
Thanks. Thanks for being invited, and I apologize I'm late. I feel already privileged to be here with three ladies in this forum, because I think on an average women lead in a different way than men. Now, not all men are equal, not all women either, but there is a difference and a balance which is needed. Appreciate it. Yeah, what is leadership? I think there is one of the topics where most books are being written about how to lead and what is leadership. And then you ask to a leader and he said, I don't know, how do I walk? When did I learn it? I don't know. This is a difficult topic to catch. In my view, leadership became more complicated because our society is becoming more complicated. There are much more angles. So I would say, as a first statement, if you are a person who wants to look mono-dimensional, just from one side, then I think in this society it's difficult to be a good leader. The society is too complicated for that. We ever had a coach, and he said about authentic leadership in our company, and everybody wanted to be an authentic leader, and we discussed it, and he said, oh, wait a minute, be more yourself. No, wait a minute, not all of you. Be more yourself with skills. Because being authentic and just being yourself for some of you is not really what we need. So it is good to have some skills also and to develop that. Leaders, I don't know, normally we describe, and we had the discussion recently in the Netherlands also about the elite. Leaders feel they're part of the elite. I found it interesting. If you look what the elite is, those are the people who are privileged. There's the upper layer of society. Those are the richest people, etc. That's called the elite, according to the dictionary. I think that needs a revision. If you want to have that privilege to lead, or if you are a leader, I mean, you are nothing without other people who see you also as a leader. I mean, who cares that you see yourself as a leader? It is important that the rest feels or sees that you are a leader. And taking responsibility for other people is critical. And funny enough, that's not in the dictionary, so I would like to rewrite that and to take responsibility for other people. By the way, all leaders, I hope, are followers also. I don't believe that you can be a leader only. People are leaders and followers. And that comes to a very important element, I think, of leadership, which is being from time to time also just insecure, but have courage. Have courage to deal with your own insecurity, or to be very curious what's happening around and searching for the right things. Those kind of things are, for me, very important elements of leadership. When I started 12 years ago as CEO of DSM, people said, and I asked myself also, so what do you want to do? And said, I want to run the company successfully and improve the state of the world a little bit, or do something like that. Many of the financial analysts said, oops, dangerous combination. Bad CEO choice. What do you want to do really? I said, both, the combination of both. That looks good and interesting to me. Now, some people said, well, you can forget the stock of the company. 12 years later, we did much better than the index, so I think many people see, okay, those two things can go hand in hand. You can run a company successful and take the responsibility for society, for our planet, etc. I believe in 12 years from now, those two things must go hand in hand together. If you don't do that as a company, you don't future-proof yourself. The millennials don't work for your company anymore. They don't buy your products anymore. You don't get the license to operate. You lost out on your emissions on carbon pricing or whatever it is. So the combination for business leaders is, I think, very important. And then you talk about purpose, but it is an overused word. And I think what we are doing, you are at this moment in the tent, the SDG tent. We have this tent already for 15 years. It was the WFP tent. We renamed it this year to the SDG tent. We got great support of André, talking about leadership, by the way André addresses things, I think, is a remarkable form of leadership. He doesn't like me to say that, so I stress it again. Indeed, but it's true. But it also shows, hey, the world has a strategy. We, the elite, are aware, the SDGs. Many people here, almost all people know what the SDGs are. It's very interesting if we go 2 streets further and say the world has a strategy, global goals. People have no clue and missed totally that the world has a strategy, by the way. And ask only one question. Are we included in that strategy, or is that a strategy which is only known by the boardroom? And you have those companies, you know, where the board is very happy with the strategy, the rest of the company has no clue what they're doing. And I think that is one of our tasks, to link society to all the activities we are doing. And I think if we look to the Yellow Vest and all the things, I think there's a big, big challenge ahead of us. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to come back to you, Sue, and first of all invite you, if you have any reactions to what you've heard, but then also to open up the sort of the last theme around how can we better prepare leaders for this world? What kind of people should we be looking for? As Stephen said, part of what we do is selection and who's got the stuff. But then also, what do we do with them, those that have the stuff, so that they're ready?
So one of the things I'm just so struck with the comments of the panelists, and my reflection on hearing it, a couple things resonate a lot for me. First is the use of the word authentic, because I think there's 2 watch-outs with authentic. First, I think is so well said, is like, that doesn't mean blurting out the first thing that comes to your mind. That's different than authentic. And understanding that how people hear you is different depending on that person's background. I think that's not being politically correct. That's not being careful or practiced or phony. That's being thoughtful. And so I think that authentic does not equal thoughtful, and I like thoughtful. I think the other thing about authentic that just is so important is, I was there in Silicon Valley during .com. I was there when we sequenced the human genome. It's so much easier to be seen as a great leader when business is good and margins are high. I mean, let's be honest. One of my more cynical colleagues we would say, we're doing well on leadership, we're a great place to work, the fortunes put us as one of the best places, and he would say, well, I could just track the stock price, and the stock price being high, we do well on the Fortune survey. And I thought, oh, that's just like so cynical, and I disagree with that, and then I realized the data did suggest that. And I'm not saying that to be cynical or to poo-poo leadership or the value of inspiration or purpose. But I think as we're being humble and authentic, one way to check yourself on your authenticity is, how will I lead? What will be the value proposition in hard times? How will I feel about how I've attracted the kind of talent we need today, where talent is scarce and times have generally been good in business during a downturn? Because I think real leadership and real authenticity comes from the hard times, and what you do and how you show up when a clinical trial fails, when your funding stream goes down, when your margins are contracted. How do you take scarce resources and deploy them? So I think that's the real challenge for leaders, is as you put things in place, will they be there during the hardest times? And I think when I hear this, we're in this go, go, go period. Go, go, go feels good, and you can get ahead of yourselves. And so I think, having gotten ahead of myself, I've been really trying to reflect what is the long-term thing? What are the values we share and we all care about? And just one quick comment on on capabilities and inclusion and opening the aperture for who your talent is. I think looking at where you get talent is so important and so essential. And building capabilities and talent within your own institution is extraordinary. You know the people who already are working in your place, so helping them elevate, helping them accelerate their careers is fantastic. There are technical skills. I often point out to people who say, well, you know, I'm new here and I want to do this. I'm not going to have you do brain surgery unless you're trained. I mean, that's sort of an outlier, but there are technical, you know, I don't want anybody to make a biotech drug who doesn't know how to make a biotech drug, if it's for my family. So there are limits to how much you can stretch your career in technical areas because there are quality control issues and compliance and regulations. So within that, though, there's still a lot of team-oriented activities where you can stretch and grow and build capabilities.
That's right. Thanks, Sue. So much good stuff there. One thing I just highlight for the panelists is a little bit of this sense that we're in maybe the hype cycle of business with purpose, right? And as we know, it's really easy in whether it's blockchain or e-commerce, when the money's flowing in, everyone's saying the same thing. And then I think the real question is, times will get tougher, and macro and otherwise, and are we building systems that'll have the staying power, that'll actually get the fundamentals right? Maybe, Rain, you want to get in? Again, from HR, how are you guys thinking about grooming this next generation of leaders? Who are you looking for? How are you training them?
Okay. Maybe for me, the challenge is a little bit different because JD.com actually is the largest, I would say, retailer from online and offline in China. And so all over China, we own 180,000 employees. So a lot of leaders we lead. How to grow them, how to develop them, this is a, challenge, put on my desk. And so for us, actually, every year and for, some certain level above the managers, we will give 360, like assessment from line manager and peers, and also their team members will give the assessment, and to generate the report, to let them to know their strengths and also the weaknesses, how to develop themselves. And from the company perspective, we generated a very powerful, I would say, digital training program. Let them tailor-made, their training process. And we open the courses here, and people can select it. And also, from our system, we use the data and through the ranking, and also, use the AI to make the mapping and to make the recommendation to them what courses you will take. And also, we open the real project and open a lot of, I would say, important role within our company and open for the young talent. They will make the challenge as a project leader and to run the team. And then we will identify the best leader. Because after, finish the project, because we develop a assignment platform here, and the team member will give the comments and also label you. And so they know their weakness, and also, from the company perspective, we can identify the best leaders there. Mm-hmm. And also, we took the initiative and in China set up talent alignment unit, and within China, and 10 enterprises fully, engaged in that, I would say, unit, like Unilever and P&G and Coco and also HP, and all of them, to be the partner of JD.com. We took initiative on that. And that, I would say, talent alignment unit, and for, collaboration for the recruitment. Like we will be like a joint, campus recruitment to be together. And also, for the job rotation, we even sign our top talent to, other company for like 1 month or 3 months and let them to understand the branding, branding customers thinking and the supplier thinking, and how, for the collaboration going forward. And also Unilever and the P&G, they assign their talent to us and to understand the e-commerce business model and how they will run e-commerce business and to be more successful. So to let them, really have the linking side and think, more cross the boundaries and to grow them.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Maheen, so again, Pakistan, huge, as you laid out, huge youthful population, development of that talent, critical, you need the leaders. How are you feeling about that?
So I think, while I would like to believe that leadership can be taught, I'll be honest, and I'll say that I think there's certain qualities of a leader that perhaps are inherent. And I think there's two things that really define how effective a leader is. One of those is the ability to make decisions when presented with certain information. And the second is to be able to listen. And I'll share a personal story with you, which kind of taught me these things. And it did really change the way I perceived myself after that. So about 3 years ago, I was actually in an accident where I lost vision in one eye. Now, it was temporary and it didn't last very long, but it went on for about 2 or 3 months. And what that does is that you go to work on a daily basis. You're not able to look at a screen. You're not able to look at a phone. You're not even able to read a piece of paper. So what do? What you have to do at that point is that you rely on all the people that you've appointed to give you verbal briefings. And so what that means is that your ability to listen, goes from here all the way to here, because you've kind of cut out a lot of the noise that we see in social media or through emails or through data that is, just presented to us on a screen. And when you are able to listen, your entire concept of making decisions changes. So when you talk about going up the corporate ladder, like we teach our interns and we teach our management trainees when they come in that this is how you have to climb the corporate ladder, you say you certainly do that. But at the same time, real leadership or developing that in a management trainee is for them to look around and see who else is in their cohort and say, okay, how can I lift them up as well? How can I build them up with me? Because they will be my support when I am sitting at a certain position. And when we look at it from the industry perspective, and we look at it as CEOs, it is not just about which company is going to have more assets under management or which company is going to have more clients. It's about how do you raise the industry and how do you grow the industry to really push penetration through and lift savings as an objective for the entire country, because that is really what is going to solve your problem. And finally, and I think most importantly, as parents of children who will be in this room in the next 20 to 30 years, incredibly important to not just focus on which college to get into, which school to go to, but also in this world, which is so polarized, how to be kind and how to be tolerant. And I think those things would really define sort of how you would develop the ability of leadership within a younger generation. So for me, it is not just about thinking about, operationally how to do this. And I think as leaders, or when you talk about politicians, I think they weren't listening, which is why you had the elections in 2016 in the United States that you did, which is why you had Brexit. These things were not an accident. And we are sitting now in a very polarized world where populism is the name of the game. And if we're going to get beyond that, then I think as leaders, we really need to start listening a lot more.
That's right. So actually picking up something that Sue had mentioned and passing earlier around and listening and really make it sort of pivotal. Stephane, your reactions to what you've heard and your own thoughts about how we develop leaders for this world.
Yeah, so many great things were said. Maybe I had something different because I don't know what I would be able to add that's we have something that's a little bit unique in our company. Our entire company is distributed. Like we have people in 500 cities in the world, 1,500 people in the company, 500 cities. That's on average 3 people per city. So as you can imagine, it's a very different way of operating the business. And so it starts with the history of this company was the leaders were in Silicon Valley, and the people that were quote unquote followers were everywhere else. And fast forward 15 years, obviously some of the people that were somewhere else who are still at the company have had an incredible career within the company, and they are the leaders of the company. And meanwhile, we've also hired some very junior people in Silicon Valley who might be reporting to people that are remote. So one thing that's been, I would say, unique and a journey, because it's not taught in business school, is that path. You know, how do you go from being an individual contributor who works from home and is potentially pretty isolated from the rest of the company and potentially essentially not getting a ton of context, just being told, like, you do this, you just do it, and you're going to be measured on whether you did it or not, to, you know, realizing that you don't want to be doing the same thing for 2, 5, 10 years in a row, and therefore you want to have a career path. So how you know, do we build a career path for people that may never come to the office, some of whom I've actually never met face-to-face? Like, we literally have people that have been in the company for 5, 6, 7 years that I've seen millions of times on video conference calls but never actually met physically. And that, I think, is a true revolution that is enabled by digital technology. I do think it's the future of work, but it requires a very different type of recruiting strategy and a very different type of talent development strategy than what a lot of traditional companies can do.
And so, okay, but still, we can learn a lot in extreme environments. And so give us a few pieces. How have you overcome that intensely decentralized structure?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it starts by hiring people that are excited to do it. You know, time and time again, we get, you know, great engineers from Google who come and interview and they say, we love the mission of your company. We love what you do. This sounds so amazing. It's the future. And then we tell them how we organize, and they say, well, I don't think that's going to work for me. And A, that means, well, you don't actually believe this is the future. So, you know, like, first of all, so thank you. And B, I can't imagine how you would be successful here, so you don't have a job. And so, you know, part of it is just making sure that it's fully embedded in the recruiting process. But then secondly, giving people the type of training they need in order to be successful, because just because you buy into it conceptually doesn't mean that it's going to be easy day to day, right? And so there's a lot of bad behaviors we all take, you know, the discussion at the water cooler, the, you know, I'm connected to the right people in the company, therefore I know what's up. Like, there's a lot of things that happen at traditional corporations that need to be adapted if you want everybody within the company to have a fair shot, even if they might be 1,000 miles away from where I'm sitting, as an example.
I mean, hugely relevant, because clearly the organization of work is shifting, and that's part of what leaders need to grapple with. All right, again, last words on this topic. Feike, what words of wisdom do you have for us?
If you lead, and I ask myself, you lead out of what? Out of a set of values you have. And most likely everybody in this audience have values also. How do you know? I think you only know whether you really have values when you still had those values when they were tested. Having values when they're not tested is a very easy thing. Now let's make it one step more complicated. Does your organization have values? That's one step more complicated. And that organization will be challenged on whether it really has that values, when they still have that values when they are tested. Or that they say, wait a minute, you will understand, etc., etc., etc. And that will be noticed by society, by your own people. So I think, first of all, values and sticking to those values when they are tested is very important. The second discussion I have sometimes with our leaders also is saying, how are you perceived? And then some people say, is that important? Because it's important that I lead and I bring the organization from A to B, right? So if I bring the organization from A to B, why is it important how I'm perceived or how people think about me? I said, oh, really? Yeah, that is what leaders should do, right? Move from A to B. I said, good. And do you do that alone? No, with other people. Good. So why is it not important how you're perceived, how other people look to you, how they think about you, if you want to motivate them to do a lot of things? How can you transition an organization from A to B? I think you need to be curious, you need to look around, you need to observe. And based on those observations, hopefully develop a vision where you want to go to in interaction with others and challenging your own curiosity and your own insecurity. And then starting to take decisions, as we discussed. And I sometimes use the law 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5 decisions need to be fully consistent with the direction you want to go. If it is 2 out of 5, you lose your credibility. It's even a minority. 3 out of 5 is just a small majority. 4 out of 5 decisions in sync with what you say is a big majority. Now, some people might ask, why not 5 out of 5? Well, if you run an organization, run a country or whatever, that is not the same as a religion. I understand that sometimes you need to be pragmatic. When you are pragmatic, you can never, in my book, infringe your values. Never do that. But you can be sometimes pragmatic a little bit on your move from A to B. But not too often, because the organization will see that, your people will see that, and you will lose, according to me, your credibility. How do we develop our new leaders? My oldest son is 21, studying economics. And recently, my wife and myself had a long discussion with him and his younger brother about how do you look to yourself? Who are you becoming? What are your strengths, weaknesses? How do other people look to you? If you progress, what kind of person are you becoming? What kind of person do you want to be, etc.? And then the second question is, you are being trained later on as an economist, MBA, all kinds of educations we give the next generation. Is this ever being discussed? No, of course not. Never. Is this a topic at the university? No. We are not a bunch of softies. Come on. And the question is really, how do we educate the next generation? And of course, at the age of 21, they don't know all the answers on those questions, and it will further progress. But I think it would already be a gift if we teach the next generations to ask, to learn to ask those questions to themselves. And maybe they will answer those questions different when they are 25 or 30 or 35, most likely for sure. But to teach that a next generation, I think, would be an enrichment, because they will grow up in a faster world with more technology, in a world which is more globalized, in a world which is more complex, in a world where more angles need to be addressed at the same moment. So I think that is an important element for the next generation. Maybe last thing, I just came out of a climate session, and one of the persons in the audience asked, I was sitting next to my prime minister, by the way, and how will the next generation look to the leadership of this generation? And our prime minister said, that's really a typical question for Mr. Sijbesma. I said, thank you very much. And I was silent. How will the next generation look to us and our leadership? I said, I cannot predict it. I can hope something. I found it hard to predict. One thing I am for sure, and that is that we can still decide right now how our next generation is looking to us. And if this generation will transfer the burden of climate change and some other burdens to the next generation, and that we have a good life and enjoyed it, and transfer the burden to the next generation, I don't think that the next generation will look very positive to the leadership of this generation. But the good news, it's not yet over. We are still making that legacy, and so it's up to us what to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Great questions. Thank you. Speaking of questions, I'd like to invite some questions from the audience here. I would remind you, as my colleague, Professor Schutte, likes to say, a question is a single sentence ending in a question mark. So a few questions here.
I have two questions for the entire panel. The first question is that being a CEO or being a leader is a very lonely job. How do you guys deal with it, and what advice do you have for others who have issues dealing with it? And the second question has to do with my belief that governments my fear that governments might not get their act together as far as climate change is concerned. So as leaders of your companies, what are your companies going to be doing? Because in this place, there are a lot of ideas exchanged, but I just want to hear if there are any commitments you can make today.
Okay, so loneliness at the top, and something about how you're really going to step up and fill the void left by business. Do I have different questions? I want to get a variety out there.
My question was actually mentioned by Sue earlier. She said that true leadership is when things are hard. And so as an aspiring young leader, I want to know, how is that different than the things that were listed before? We heard about values, we heard about listening. Yeah, are there differences?
And differences. And one more. How about in the back here? And then you guys can pick which ones you want to respond to. It's like a menu of options.
Thank you. My question is, what is your point of view on co-leadership?
All right, so here we go. The questions on the top are really loneliness at the top. What do you really think business can step up and do, especially with government often seeming incapacitated in many contexts? Really dealing with when things are hard. What do you really do? Not when it's easy, but when it's hard. And also about co-leadership. Should it really be the one person at the top versus how do you think about team and leadership? Anyone want to grab one? You only have to take one.
Okay, so I'll deal with what happens when things are hard. Okay, so so when I became a CEO, this was like 10 years ago, and it was the start of one of the best bull runs on the stock market that Pakistan had seen. And so, yes, it was easy to make money. It was easy to grow the company. It was very easy to fall into bad habits. But in 2017, the markets crashed about 30%, and that was the first time we had seen that kind of correction since 2008. And I think we had to reassess and redesign very quickly. Because as you know, with investment management firms, money can flow in and out very quickly. And if you're not if you're not quick to shift your strategy, you suddenly find that instead of managing a firm of billions of dollars, you are down to a few $100 million in the span of a few months, which is ideally, as an asset manager, not where you want to be. So what we did at that point is we reassessed, okay, what are the strengths? Clearly, the stock market is not selling. But we had about 6 or 7 other different products that we could push out. And I think the trick was at that time is which one to pick and how to push it out when there is so much negativity going on in terms of the economy and there's so much negativity going on in terms of asset prices. It did require, and I think what helped us a lot in that is that we had excellent, second in commands, if you like, who were there with good advice, who were there, we were in touch with what was going on with clients, we were in touch with what was going on in their minds. And really, because it was a flight to safety, we said, okay, let's just offer that flight to safety. So instead of our assets coming down during that time, we actually captured market share over that time period. So I think it's incredibly important to know the flip or know when times are going to go bad. And that comes back to my original point about listening and then making that decision. Because we could have gone either way. We could have not listened, and we could have just delayed that decision, but that would have cost us quite significantly. So the fact that we were able to shift ourselves and shift our entire strategy, I think that's what pulled us through. So the markets were negative for the next 2 years. So we're sitting now in 2019, where finally we're seeing some positivity come back. But we at least weathered the storm, and I think that's what the change was.
When you were dealing with that on this issue of lonely at the top, how many people were in the room with you as you navigated that?
The final decision, well, we had many, many meetings around it, but the final decision, look, it always stops with you. You're always going to have to make the call yourself. Hence, the concept of making decisions is incredibly important, because your decision is going to determine the fate of not just the company, but the fate of all the people that you employ, and the impact that it's going to have on your investors, etc. So that decision-making point is always yours. So the lonely at the top, I think that goes with the territory. It's not something you can shy away from, and I think it's just something you should at some point accept and embrace.
Okay. Want to get in on it?
Yeah, although my simple answer is, if you feel lonely at the top, make it less lonely. Co-lead is a good answer. And co-lead does not have to be officially. Can also be unofficially. Invite some other people to join you stronger. I agree that at the end of the day, decisions need to be taken. And when it is hard, it's more difficult. And I don't mind that people are insecure. I'm insecure myself on certain occasions or searching for the right things. But you need to be determined. You can be insecure, but you need to have courage also. And those things, for me, need to go together. On climate, we just had that discussion. Who is moving faster at this moment, companies or governments? I found it hard to say because both can improve quite a bit. But I am really begging almost for governments to make faster the right frameworks that pushes companies to go even faster. We just had a meeting with 80 companies, the CEO climate leaders. They committed themselves to set voluntarily stronger targets ahead of where governments are, to put internally a price on carbon, waiting for governments to put really an external price on carbon, preparing on investing more in innovations and giving more disclosure on what they are doing. So we just agreed on that with 80 companies. So they are moving, but we're begging also, please, move faster. I think as leaders, we can do much more and show much more the responsibility for the things we do lead.
Maybe Rain, do you want to
pick up one?
Pick up one?
Yeah, okay. Maybe I will pick up like the loneliness as the top as a leader. Yeah, actually, for China companies, sometimes, always, people question about like the entrepreneur, ship, and always, he's on the top and defines the value for the company. But now the practice in China, still we would say, the entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur and as a founder, like CEO of the company, still they will, drive the company, they work very hard and make the impact on that. And so how they will make the company to be more successful. And I think, quite important, they will identify the diversify, I would say, leadership team and work for them. And also, open the ears and listen, from different aspects and to develop the company. Yeah. So yeah, always, as a leader on the top, and we will feel a little bit alone. And sometimes no people cover you, but you will cover your group. So this is why we said going forward, the seventh leadership is quite important. And you will more serve your team and open the resource and to, like mentoring and coaching and to raise them up. And to, you are not a fight just as one boss, but a lot of bosses, work for you, and then you will not feel, alone. Yeah, thank you.
I have one difficult question for you. So obviously there's a lot of dynamism in Chinese organizations like JD. As you interact with your peers here, do you get a sense that there's unique things coming in China, or do you feel it's more common, the kind of challenges you face as an internet company?
Yeah, as an international, I really see, like for the young generation, entrepreneur, young generation in China, they're growing up very fast and with a globalization, vision, and also build up or set up the team very diversified and to, to have the links with the global business. And also, I really, sometimes, not like, Western culture, sometimes, the more like the leadership to, not follow the, like by one guy. Yeah. But in China, yeah, most of the, I would see the companies, they will really have the entrepreneurship, their DNA to be embedded in the company. If without, I would see the entrepreneur founder CEO, and this company is not the company with the original, values there. Yeah,
okay,
this is unique.
All right, Stephane, we're going to start moving towards wrap up. So response to questions and maybe just some final thoughts for us.
So I'll try to answer the three questions, except climate change in one answer, which is, there's an expression, never let a good crisis go to waste. I think when the going gets tough is when you really see who's on your team and who's not. And the people that are not leave either on their own or because you realize they're just not part of the team. And it does make the team a lot stronger. And when you recover from that, because eventually you do, and by the way, like every tech company, when we tell history, it looks like the exponential up and to the right. That's not reality. The highs are highs and the lows are very low. And when it comes back up and the team is stronger as a result because it went through the low together, you're not as lonely because you share a lot more. And that's really been my experience is we've had some really tough times as a company, and we have a leadership team that stayed together, and I feel really comfortable sharing all of my, authentic insecurities with them because, it works. And so maybe that's also the co-leadership point. At the end of the day, I am the CEO, and there's only one CEO of the company, but we do make most of the decisions together, and I do share a lot with them. The question about climate change, the way I took your question, and I don't know if that's how you intended it, but it sounded like what does each of our companies specifically do? And I would say, here's what we do. A big part of climate change is due to commuting, people going to work. And not only do we have 1,500 people that don't commute who come to work at our company, but we also have hundreds of thousands of people who work for our customers who work from home and also don't commute. So hopefully, continuing to grow the company every year allows us to prevent more cars from being on the road. And until at least everybody has a self-driving, electric, zero pollution type of car, hopefully that helps a little bit with climate change.
All right. So
no private jets.
No private jets. So anyway, I would really like to start wrapping up, thanking the panelists. And I'm going to, inspired by Feike here, I'm going to pull an old MBA teacher trick, and I'm going to cold call somebody to close this up. So why don't we pass in, yeah, that's you, Andre. So Andre really has been instrumental in bringing the INSEAD here and to the SDG tent. So do you have some last thoughts for the group on this broad topic of where we're taking leadership?
Thought on leadership, probably not, because most of the things have been said. What I'm very grateful to is that nobody has mentioned the term profit, nobody has mentioned the financial return, nobody has said success equals getting richer. And I find that is an important tenet. I mean, humility, as described by all of you individually, has to do with being able to listen, has to do with being able to understand to eliminate uncertainties. And I think you've demonstrated some leadership into that thing. Now, all I wanted to say is first to thank the panelists. Thank you very much. I wanted to thank the audience. And the reason I'm interested, I'm particularly pleased today is because the panelists are talking about a subject that is concerning lots of us. They're doing that in the framework of a new initiative from INSEAD. I don't know how many of you actually know the institute, the Global Institute for Business and Society. We have listened and we have realized that there seems to be a certain disconnect between business success, and perception of the same thing in the public. And this is why INSEAD has decided to develop this institute to bring some solution, or at least some attempt at solution, into this discrepancy between business, the profit-making mechanism, the money that is going to help us to grow the world, the money needed to lift more people out of poverty, the SDG number 1, I remind you, and at the same time do that in a collaborative fashion. And the fact that you all come here to listen to this conversation reassures me in the fact that you obviously is a needed initiative. So thank you very much for coming. This terminates our series of 4 or 5 events that we did with the GIBS this year in Davos. Please come back next year. We will do some more. And in the meantime, business and society are important issues, and the door is open if you want to discuss it.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you, everyone. Please stick around for some drinks. Wonderful.